Okay. Hello and a very warm welcome to this new edition of NGG's Australia-India Conversations for 2022. Wishing all of our viewers a very happy and prosperous new year. India and Australia ties are experiencing new momentum with the elevation of bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Both countries today are working hard towards making a long-pending comprehensive economic cooperation agreement a reality. Today, we have with us Australia's former Minister for Trade, Investment and Tourism, the Honourable Andrew Robb AO, who is credited for negotiating free trade agreements with South Korea, Japan and China, as well as the comprehensive strategic partnership with Singapore, and of course, the enormous 12-country multilateral Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement. Additionally, he conducted 85 investment roundtables with 28 countries. Mr. Robb also played an instrumental role in reviving the free trade talks between Australia and India in 2014-2015, visiting India over 5 times in 2015 to meet with Nirmala Sitharaman, his counterpart, to secure a high-quality free trade agreement. In the last 7 years, a lot has changed, and there's renewed optimism in the bilateral ties. And of course, the personal bonhomie that exists between our prime ministers and trade ministers, and the changing world dynamics with respect to the pandemic and our diversification goals within the New World Order. Let's hear from Mr. Robb his thoughts on the re-energized focus on the bilateral ties and the lessons he learned whilst navigating India's public services and bureaucracy. Thank you, Mr. Robb. Welcome to NGG's Australia-India Conversation. Pleasure to be speaking with you today and look forward to our freewheeling conversation.
Thanks very much, Dipen. Yes, so am I. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's kick it off, Mr. Robb. As the former trade minister, you played an integral role in reviving the trade talks between Australia and India. What was the energy like then in that time? And what did you learn whilst traversing this journey?
Well, it was quite exciting, innovating, if you like, to be exposed as I was, not just in Delhi, New Delhi, but in many parts of the country. I've actually been, I think now, about 9 or 10 times in the last 10 years to India. There was a highly concentrated effort there at one stage, but I have really been exposed quite strongly to what's going on there over the last decade or longer. And there really is a vibrancy. There's an openness, there's an enthusiasm, which is infectious when you get to deal with so many people at different levels. And it was contagious in a way. Of course, even with the chief ministers at a state level, you felt things were on the way. And cities like Bangalore, for instance, it felt like the whole city was a building site as you moved around it. There was just so much happening. And that was just one of so many instances around the country. So, I felt that there is a revolution happening in India. The bureaucracy hopefully will catch up with this, and we'll really see some wonderful things happening.
Absolutely. And having visited India, so many times over the last decade or so, and particularly that concentrated time in 2015, and obviously leading up to today in 2022, what's your assessment of the new developing India?
Well, of course, I mean, we all change. Australia's evolved, even in the few years that I've had a more closer relationship with India. India's evolved further. So, nothing stands still. And in terms of the relationship, it's only it's only improved, I think, as we've gone on, because the things that are relevant to good partnership and are increasingly becoming obvious to people, and the ambitions that we've got, the expectations. The thing that struck me about India is that vibrancy I talked about, it reflects the fact that the average age is 27. Most of our major markets, they're aging populations. China's an aging population. Europe, aging populations. These are two big trading centres for Australia and investment areas. But I think India, with that youth which is shining through, and the thing is that, and I've seen it around the world, that the young people and many people in disadvantaged situations in countries historically have not known what they're missing out on. They've been, in many ways, remained ignorant and poor for all their life. Now you go to anywhere in India, and of course there's still a lot of poverty, but you go into the villages and there'll be a digital screen someone's hooked up somehow, connected to. They haven't got a communications network perhaps, but they've picked up a satellite connection, and everyone knows what they're missing out on. And all these young people, they're seeing what other young people around the world have got, and quite rightly, they've got expectations to have the same. And it's starting to manifest itself, around India. And that's what's driving, I think, so much of the politics, is this expectation that we can have what everyone else has got, and it's exciting, the fact of the realisation to start with. And now, with such a strong democracy, then at the polling booth, they're giving expression to that wish, to that expectation, and that's driving politics and driving those that are in power and business to satisfy those new expectations.
Absolutely, I totally agree. The young population, under the average age, as you said, between 27 and 28 years of age, and some of my research show that 25% of the global population under 25 live in India, and it's a very aspirational, highly skilled, English-speaking, movement that is happening in India at the moment. And with the advent of television and movies and the internet, certainly their aspirations have grown to, the need of the likes of, the white goods and nice houses and apartments and a great car and, everything of that nature. So that there's definitely a push coming in from the younger generation, which will excel India in the future. I totally agree with you. As the trade minister, you negotiated, particularly with Asian economies such as South Korea, Japan, and China, FTAs very successfully. And you also tried extremely hard, and I was there a number of times when you went to India, and I saw the work that you put in. It seems that the India FTA negotiations faltered and sort of went into the cold for a long time. Where do you think these relations faltered, and what do you think both countries need to do differently this time as they're negotiating the free trade agreement?
Well, as I mentioned, I think that both countries have evolved, and some of the underlying reasons why I think it faltered, hopefully are moving, and I suspect they are. But what I found was that the preconditions were there. That was the frustrating thing about it. The political will was there. In 2015, every time I went, if I struck a barrier, a significant barrier, I said, is there any chance of seeing the Prime Minister? Because I was there with Tony Abbott when we first went, and there was agreement. I think we were the first foreign nation to come and recognise his win when he became Prime Minister. And he expressed right back at that first meeting his eagerness to see the further opening up, and why don't we start with a trade agreement between Australia and India? So he was a big advocate. He was the advocate, the key advocate. And I'd ask, could I see him? Now, here's a man running $1.4 billion, 1.4 million people, billion people. And, I'm just a trade minister from a small country, relatively. But 5 times that year, he met me privately to talk about what were the problems, and 5 times he fixed it up. Wow. And the trouble was, to be honest with you, the business sector was enthusiastic. The Prime Minister was enthusiastic. The Prime Minister was keen to actually intervene, as I mentioned, on many occasions. But we got stymied in the end, to be honest, by the long-standing, or at the time, the sort of prevailing attitudes of the bureaucracy. And I'd seen it in other trade agreements around the world that we were involved in, and India was involved in. It wasn't unique to Australia, the attitude, and I think it reflected internal politics and the role the bureaucracy saw, and perhaps it had to shoulder over many years. Bureaucracy had to do a lot in running the country, and perhaps in leading it. I don't know. I'm not close enough to the history, but clearly, they were a voice for many in India, and they saw themselves as such, more so than the politicians. So, which I thought was what I think is evolving, because I think Prime Minister Modi is the most outstanding fellow, and I've since seen, doing a lot of commercial work into India, some of the exciting things, the important things, transformational things that are now happening. And a lot of the regulation that was really stymieing business, and certainly foreign business in India, from my observation, has been progressively changing and being reformed. So, I suspect that my experience with the bureaucracy hopefully would be a different one if I was there now doing that job.
Totally agree. And there's been, I would suggest that from the time you went to India to negotiate, there was barely 12 months that had gone past since the BJP and the Narendra Modi government had been voted in. And so you had a bureaucratic system that was inherited from the previous government. And I believe today that system is now really nicely oiled and working well. The government has also implemented strategies where they're bringing in people in the bureaucracy from the private sector. They're promoting diplomats and bureaucrats to become ministers, such as the current Minister for External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar. And of course, the biggest issue now that has prevailed from 2015 to today is the pandemic. And the pandemic has changed the mind frame of a number of countries and people within those countries, particularly from a geopolitical and a geo-economic perspective. And there's a lot more focus on the Indo-Pacific being, the likes of Korea, Japan, Indonesia, India, China, and so on. And I think that the bureaucracy in India has now definitely turned. And we also have a new trade minister in Piyush Goyal, who also used to be an investment banker in his previous life. So I believe that there is definitely major changes that have happened. Just with regards to
enormously encouraging.
Absolutely. And as you're aware, Tony Abbott was recently made, late last year, the special envoy for Scott Morrison to India. And when he visited, his first meeting in India was with Narendra Modi. So he still has a very, very long memory, and he really very much appreciates the support that Australia, the Prime Minister, yourself, and the business delegation that was led by the Prime Minister and yourself in 2014 to be the first foreign leader to congratulate him on his win. So there's a long memory there. So I think he has a warm feeling for us in Australia, and I think we'll go forward in leaps and bounds. From your perspective, Mr. Robb, do you think that Australia and India really do make strong partners, and if so, why?
I certainly do. I think that there's a whole range of extraordinarily important reasons. Firstly, and very importantly, we've got similar values. So much of what's important to the average citizen in both countries, the family values, etc., are very important. We're both entrepreneurial as nations. We've both, of course, got strong democracies. We both support rules-based international systems. We've shared a colonial history, for good or bad, but we've got similar styles of government as a consequence. Of course, we share, the English language is certainly common to both, and importantly, we've got complementary economies. So you add all those up, it's a long checklist of reasons, very solid reasons, critical reasons why we should be very effective partners. Now we sort of lost one another for decades, to be honest. But I think as you articulated, this focus on the sort of the Indo-Asian region is, for all sorts of reasons, has become very pronounced for all of us, and I think the relationships are so important, and there's a lot more reason for us as two nations to make the most of all of those characteristics which we share, right? And of course, a lot of it's being, I suppose, catalysed by the security issues and the Quad. But I'm seeing from the Quad, I'm seeing good commercial activities, mainly just because all of these things, even if it's on a security basis, it still creates more interest, more information, more opportunity for people to think about one another, well, like we may not have in the past. But I do feel that all of those issues, you've got also India. In my sense, people talk about the new India, and I understand that, but I think of it more in the context of a re-emerging India, right? If India proudly, and it's why you see this confidence in India, even when things aren't, as good as they might want them to be. There is a confidence about being able to do it and their right to do it, because of their huge history. For 18 of the last 20 centuries, India was a part of the centre of economic and political gravity in the world. Right? And in my view, India is heading strongly back to where it's been for those 18 of the last 20 centuries. So, so India is becoming more and more relevant to countries like Australia because of the way in which they are developing and making the most of those attributes that I see us sharing. So it's all ahead of us, and it's good news. Others have said, and Peter Varghese made this point, I think, in that wonderful report of his, that there is no other major market in the world that over the next 20 or 30 years would be more significant than India to Australia. And I share that view.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just moving along with that Australia-India relations, and I totally agree with your comments. What do you think are the obstacles in this relationship, and how do we overcome those obstacles?
Well, there's been, I mean, businesses burnt in decades gone by. I mean, there's been other enthusiastic periods, not like now, but that's come and gone, and businesses have gone in, and partly because of the, you know, the regulation and the sort of the more closed nature of India, I think, in those times, but also the backlog in the legal system, where people could take years before a legitimate, you know, business complaint could be addressed, if at all. And so companies either didn't have the patience to make the relationships that is very important to do business in India, or they couldn't afford to wait that long. Now, I think they're things we've got to be upfront about, you know, and that sort of has led to a perception about the difficulty of doing business in India amongst a lot of Australians. Now, from what I see, and you know, observe, not just physically observe, you know, being involved in some commercial activities, etc., and seeing what is happening over there, so much of that is being addressed. You know, trust is being created. Now, trust is not just because you get to know someone over 10 years. There's now regulation in so many areas which can give you confidence to go in, and can help. You can have relationships born out of the stronger regulation, because you can, you know, even if you don't know people as well as you would if in other circumstances. So it's I think that the sorts of issues that have it's stymied the progress in a lot of the relationship in the past, again, has properly and is properly being addressed. And again, I go back to, you know, this is not a political statement, it's just a fact. I just, you know, I just feel that the Prime Minister has done so much to elevate the importance of opening up the economy and what's needed and the regulation that's needed. Also, I think some of the chief ministers, you know, are hugely competent in that regard, and hugely influential in their own area, and are themselves making regulatory changes and creating a business environment which is now far more conducive to foreigners coming in and investing and trying to engage properly.
And just to add to that, since the arrival of the BJP party and Narendra Modi's party, the World Bank's ranking for the ease of doing business, India was around 144, and today it's at 66.
There you go.
And you know, they've got rid of thousands of archaic laws. They've introduced the Insolvency Act. They've introduced GST, and many other policies that have allowed India to climb the ease of doing business rankings, the World Bank rankings, to 63, and looking at getting above 50 in the next year or so. So you're absolutely right. You know, one of the things that with the obstacles in the relationship, you talked about India. What are your thoughts about why corporate Australia is still hesitant on the India story, even though there's been quite a large shift in the momentum of the ease of doing business, and huge amounts of foreign direct investments being invested from other countries into India, but there's still a little bit of hesitance from corporate Australia. What do you think the reason is there?
Well, as we were just discussing, in a way, you know, there was a history of businesses from Australia not being successful for all sorts of reasons, and overcoming that attitude of mind, that perception, and I don't think, you know, there's enough being done like I look at that report of Peter Varghese, and I can remember the day it was brought out. It got lost. I forget what it was. It got totally lost to make something else unrelated. But you know, it was such an important document in terms of the relationship, and there's so much in it which you know, people like you and I hear about it and we read it and all the rest, but it's not out there as it should be. And I think you know, it's at every level. Well, governments at both ends have got a role to play in all this, but from the Australian point of view, encouraging even local governments to go and look at sister city relationships. It's such an important, you know, facet of building bridges in many other countries. The state governments going in and identifying themselves with individual states in India. These sorts of things we should be helping to encourage and to fund. And you know, we took that 600 people to India with the Prime Minister. We went to 8 cities. They all paid for themselves, right? They got wonderful introductions, and that the team we've got of bureaucrats from around the world who were able to come and help me. They put the program together where they identified people who were genuinely interested in what certain people on our tour were. So we're able to line up people with the appropriate interviews and all the rest of it. And it was hugely successful, but you just can't do it once and leave it, you know. And I get a sense that there hasn't been the commitment that needs to be made to promoting what is happening in India. Because, as I say, all of the things you've just been through, I mean, how remarkable it is to go from what was 140 back to 66 in the ease of doing business. And that's not over a long period of time. And that's, you know, that sort of thing is very material to people looking to invest from Australia into India. But it's not understood well enough. And there's got to be the leadership, though, the leadership from the Prime Minister down, and you just got to keep going back. That was my sense with those agreements. You know, you just got to keep turning up so that people on the other side of the table know that you're genuine, that you really are interested, you really want to do something. You do see a great opportunity to get together in a long-term relationship. And you know, I think we've been a bit patchy, if you like, in that regard. And I do think also that from the Indian point of view, you know, we've now got a huge Indian diaspora, and I think the Indian government could do so much more to use that diaspora to help inform Australians about, you know, the amazing things that are happening in India.
Absolutely. The report that Peter wrote was the India Economic Strategy to 2035. Late last year, the government and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade decided to update the report, and it's going into Parliament if it's not already there. And they conducted a number of meetings with senior stakeholders in the Australia-India space to update that report. So I'm hoping that it's relevant to today, because, you know, we've gone through the COVID scenario, geopolitical changes, and so on. And so that is an excellent initiative. I totally agree with you that, you know, it's a wonderful report, but it wasn't promoted properly. And I'm hoping the updated report will be promoted properly in Australia.
Yes.
And for its credit, the Indian government, for the very first time ever, reciprocated with a report called the Australia Economic Strategy for a single country. Slightly different in the industry sectors that Indian companies are looking to you know, benefit from or to work with Australia on, but certainly has been highlighted by the Confederation of Indian Industries and the author of that report, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa. And we can see a lot more movement and momentum towards Australia from Indian businesses now. So that it's really taking shape. But you're right, we need more promotion in Australia for the India Economic Strategy, which was authored by Peter Varghese. Andrew, just moving on, India today has acquired a significant place in the changing global paradigm as a diplomatic, at both diplomatic and economic levels. How do you think, or how should the changing world view the transformation of India, in your opinion?
Well, as I indicated earlier, I mean, I see this as a re-emergence of a great, historically, a great part of global economic and political activity, and that's that's how the world should see, as they're seeing China in the same way, they should be seeing India. And India, China's development is ahead of India's redevelopment, but India will catch up. And I think demographics are in India's favour in many, as well as many other things. But that's not a race anyway. That is not a race. It's just a matter of doing what you can, what best for your own people. And and then there's when you've got 1.4 billion, it's a really difficult task. And I think that the world should certainly view that India has re-emerged. Okay, it'll be one of the powers in the world. By the end of the century, one of the top 3 powers in the world, in my view, by the end of the century. It is now of enormous consequence, but the US has been the power for 70 years. China has got this, sharpening ambition to share that power position, and that's the reality. But I think it's in all our interest, to be honest. When you get re-emerging powers like China, that's their prerogative, and they're building a big military bases and capability. That's their prerogative, but the best way to keep peace is to have a deterrent. And I think so much of what Australia is doing with India and others to provide that deterrent is necessary and a good thing. But at the same time, it's the byproduct of that is that we've started to realise the other things that we share and the other opportunities that this creates. So it's an interesting phenomena that's going on. But I do think the world, the Europeans and the Americans and others should recognise, should understand that the role that India has got in the region, immediately in the region it's in, but progressively globally.
Great answer. Andrew, you had a really illustrious career as a minister. You travelled many, many countries, and you engaged with a lot of countries. And in terms of the way in which India builds its bilateral economic ties with other countries, for instance, Japan or Germany or Israel or UK, are there any lessons that Australian businesses or government can learn from the way India engages with other countries, and how Australia could potentially engage with India, having that knowledge base?
Well, I can't pretend to have a strong feel for how India has engaged with all of those countries. I certainly have had recent exposure, and exposure over a period of time with the way Japan has and India have been building their ties with one another, and very successfully. A lot of what Japan is doing, it is financial and technical. You take the high-speed rail that they're building down, through Gujarat to
the Delhi-Bombay corridor.
Delhi, yes. And there's others about to start now as a consequence. That technology is unbelievable. But the Japanese have gone in there with the technical skills and the wherewithal to make it all happen. And they've assisted with the financial arrangements for that infrastructure. Again, transformational infrastructure, which, and as I said, there's others now on the drawing boards around the country. So, you look forward 15 or 20 years, and just that one initiative alone will have spawned, I think, extraordinary infrastructural developments over the next 15 or 20 years throughout India. Now, to me, that's, we might be able to help a lot on the infrastructure side with the finance, but, the things that are our real strengths, education and skills, agriculture, a lot of energy issues, healthcare in particular, financial services. Now, all of these areas, we're a world leader on many of those, or we share leadership with other countries on those. We're in a position to do similar things where there can be financial support, but particularly it's the knowledge base it's a critical thing. To help take that in, help our businesses take that knowledge into India, help to build the partnerships that are important, right? When a state premier goes to see a chief minister in one of the states, line up those sorts of issues and our companies and make it happen. Do things which ensure that you get a partnership and you get projects, and we start to share that IP and that experience and that opportunity. And to me, that is the most effective. When you're doing things for the people that they're trying to improve the lifestyle, that's when you're really properly appreciated, and that's when you really get to know. And that's where, with the things that we're good at, we should be sharing it with friends, particularly like India.
Absolutely. Our mantra at NGG is Australia's strengths and India's aspirations, and how we can assist with the growth of those aspirations.
Yes.
A couple of more thoughts, Mr. Robb. The Indian diaspora in Australia is, or around the world actually, is called the living bridge between India and the countries that the diaspora live in. What more, I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier too. What more can India do to leverage the potential of the Indian community in Australia?
Well, I think back home in India, to promote within India the resource that's available, the 700,000 plus people that are available. And there's initiatives that could be taken where you start to where you introduce in some way or other the elements of that diaspora to companies at home in India, the Indian government, doing that, with organisations like yours, etc., by identifying the right people, by also, I think showcasing the business opportunities, sponsoring the showcasing of business opportunities in India, in Australia. Showcase in Australia the opportunities in India, and in all sorts of ways to do that. I think, it's persistence. These things, when we're trying to build, we're trying to build the relationship and to make the most of it. It is communication and it's contact, right? It is just, it's keeping in front of people, otherwise they'll get interested in something else. Yeah. There's a lot of competition for headspace out there, and so the priority just needs to be attached to it, and for both governments. And I think the Indian government could, if it can help to elevate the exposure of the diaspora, and in many cases, and it's not just true of Indian Australians, but if migrants from any country, they, I think, are reluctant to, be too prominent half the time. That not true of every person, as you know, but it's true as a generalisation, and so they need if they had the support of the government from the homeland that they'd be very proud of, and all the rest of it. If they had some sort of support, and it's not just financial, but it's making ministers or relevant people, all sorts of people available from India. That might, to bring them out to Australia, and then the diaspora to help showcase these people and create a program for them with all the relevant businesses. And then all of a sudden you are linking the diaspora together with the opportunities back in India, right, through those sort of initiatives. So it's not rocket science, it's not complicated, but it is a lot of persistence, and it's contact and communication. But the leadership has to be there.
Yeah. I totally understand that, because from an Indian perspective, every time you speak to an Indian person, a business person, it's never transactional for them. It's more about, come and visit me, come to the office, come to the house, meet the family, come a few times, let's get to know each other, let's become friends, and then we can do business. Whereas the mentality of the large majority of Australian businesses has always been transactional. Yes. Let's do a transaction and then we'll do something else. But I think that mentality is now changing considerably. And there is a realization that if you really want to do business with India, or if you really want to connect with Indians, the diaspora, it's more about friendship first and then transactions next.
Well, that, just to make that clear, is so important. I had a trip there a year ago, just before COVID, so it's now 2 years. That's the first thing that happened in a number of cities was I found myself in with families having a cup of tea and cakes, yeah, and just in their homes, and it was sort of totally unrelated to what we were there to do business with. But it's exactly the point you're making with. Friends first, business second.
Yes, yeah. Andrew, any last views and thoughts on the Australia-India relations? I know that from a commercial perspective, you're doing some work with India, and it's coming along nice and smoothly. Any advice for Australian businesses or Indian businesses that are looking to conduct business together?
Yeah, well, it's look. The thing is, in my view, depending on the size of your organisation, but whatever. First of all, I think you've got to spend time. In many ways, pick your state, right? I spent the last few times I've been in a more commercial sense. I've only got a little tiny operation, and I've got to make the most of it. But I had a look at what states were performing the best. Who had the best growth rates. These sorts of simple criteria, and then a bit of market intelligence about the chief minister and whatever, and also the existence of, med parks, med technical parks, and whatever they do. What were they doing? Just to do some market research in that sense. But to pick one or two states that you're going to focus on and invest time in, and then go and spend serious time investing in identifying a partner, a good partner, and be patient, and don't go if you only got enough money to go once. It's not. It doesn't like you don't have to be back there every 3 months for 3 years to find the right partner. But it's got to be quality and targeted. But you've got to be persistent again. And if you're back home, maintain the communication, right? And now we can Zoom and all that. Maintain all that sort of contact until we can more freely sort of come and go to one another's countries again. So I really feel that, and finally, I'd use the Indian diaspora to get advice. Seek out the Indian diaspora, the organisations that are representing, the Indian, Australian Indian community, and assisting them and help with that intelligence. And so, but it's again, I think it'll be enormously rewarding, the opportunity to be there. But if you know what you're doing, as you say, and culturally you understand that when you do get there, you'll end up in someone's home to start with. Don't feel uneasy about it. Yeah. Just soak it up. This is, it's part of doing business, and it's a good thing, and it helps build friendships. Yeah. And just go with the flow. It's those sorts of things would be my sense and my advice to anyone looking to create some opportunity. And they can be these can be small joint ventures, or they can be major things between universities or whatever. I think on the skills training side, we've got so much to offer with which has not been capitalised on. We've got it in lots of areas, but on the skills training side, it's just enormous. And we've had a couple of very good, successful organisations, universities. That Deakin University, been there 15 plus years now.
Yes, very successful.
Very successful, which makes some of the point I'm making about the patience you need, etc. So that'd be my few suggestions for what it's worth. Okay.
Absolutely, worth a lot. Trust me. We're just beginning the journey, and a lot of Australian companies and people really need this kind of advice and help. And on that note, Ms. Andrew Robb, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time you've taken to be with us, and hopefully we'll have another chat in the near future.
Good, Dipen. Okay, appreciate the opportunity. Okay.
Thank you.